In January of 1954, a small Japanese fishing boat would find itself in the crossfires of one of America's most devastating nuclear weapons tests. The US had used islands like Bikini Atoll to test weapons and had blocked off 57,000 square meters around the island to prevent casualties. This would be futile, however, when their latest test, Castle Bravo, would be twice as powerful as they had initially expected. Lucky Dragon Number 5, the Japanese fishing boat, may have been outside the restricted area, but were inevitably swallowed up by the radioactive ash when the weapon proved to be more devastating. The 23 fishermen on board fell ill to the radiation as soon as they returned to the harbour. Now, as one would expect, this incident caused outrage within Japan. At the height of the panic and fear caused by the nuclear devastation, Japan would be first introduced to Ishiro Honda's 1954 film Gojira. A harrowing and horrifying tale of radiation and atomic devastation, Godzilla represented the merciless and horrific disaster that the Japanese were so afraid of at the time. Godzilla has always been a powerful allegory for the devastation of atomic weapons and natural disasters in Japan. And while it has certainly had its fair share of campy monster movies, it grounds itself in deep political commentary about Japan's historical conflicts. Which is all the more reason why I think Shin Godzilla is more relevant today than ever. Under all the outrageously lengthy and repetitive politics, Shin Godzilla is an excellent depiction of government bureaucracy and how ineffective it can be in tackling emergency disasters. Believe me when I say the movie has its fair share of destruction and spectacle, but Shin Godzilla shines by being rooted in a complex and satirical political agenda. One of the coolest things about Hideaki Anno's Shin Godzilla, in my opinion, is the extent to which it pays homage to the original Godzilla movies. It utilizes the similar title card, shares similar imagery, and even reuses the original soundtrack, giving the film a very nostalgic and campy monster movie feel to it. And yet, he distinguishes this best by giving the Godzilla narrative a political twist to it. I know what's better in a monster movie than men in suits talking about policies. I think it's easy for people to be immediately turned off by the movie, especially when the introduction to all the monster mayhem is seen primarily through lots, and I mean lots, of news briefings and political meetings. It's pedantic and overstays its welcome, until you realize that's exactly the point. You're getting these seemingly arbitrary politics because it is arbitrary. Every time something devastating happens, every time Godzilla grows a little more or wreaks havoc to a district, politicians and ministers just move room to room while the destruction plays out on a TV screen. When they finally decide to take action through military measures, Hideaki Anno plays up the chain of command, having to go through half a dozen people for authorization for every single decision. It's stupidly pedantic, but that's the point. The movie decides to evolve when, in the middle of the film, the script kills off the top government officials in a helicopter. As Godzilla lays waste to a city going up in ashes, the sun sets on an ominous day of failures. That being said, it also marks the turn in the film where more responsibility and initiative is given to the new interim government, run by our protagonist Yaguchi. After working together and piling resources, they're finally able to conjure up a plan to detain the monster. Much of the film is also based off the events of the 2011 Toho Co earthquake and tsunami, as well as the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. At a magnitude of 9, the earthquake was the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan and caused devastatingly high tsunami waves. To make things worse, the tsunami also triggered the nuclear disaster at Fukushima. The efforts to decontaminate the area is still ongoing, and experts say it might take another 30 or 40 years to be completed. Japan is a disaster-prone country as it sits on fault lines, so earthquakes and tsunamis are a considerable and frequent risk to the country. The Japanese government did have extensive safety measures and emergency policies to prepare them for such an event, but were not nearly expecting the massive extent to which the area would be affected, especially in considering the tsunamis and nuclear disasters of the Fukushima power plant. Prime Minister Naoto Kan quickly established an emergency headquarters and coordinated rescue efforts, but later faced criticisms for their slow response to the disaster and helping people evacuate. His party would also suffer significant losses in local weekend elections after the disaster occurred. Shin Godzilla is a satirical critique on the impracticalities of government bureaucracy, especially in times of need. As officials argue over making sense of the issue and what policies need to be enacted, real people and real livelihoods are being affected as they speak. And while the movie depicts it in a comical and exaggerated manner, it has real-world consequences for the way nations are managed in emergencies. With the past 2 years, our world has been so caught up in a pandemic that has seen mixed government responses. While it is obviously a given that different countries would have different countermeasures, much of the news around the politics and the polarization only serves to detract from the ability of people to just get down and do the work. In that respect, I think many people can easily find some kind of authoritarian, almost radical right-wing perspective with this film. After all, the civilians of Shin Godzilla are represented as nothing more than a faceless mass waiting to be evacuated, saved, or otherwise instructed by the government. Accented Cinema actually criticized this in his video essay by highlighting the film's lack of humanity, that all the destruction and chaos of Godzilla was only seen through military action, international relations, or economics, and that much of its predecessor, especially Honda's 1954 film, was much more down to earth and focused on the families, the everyday citizen who were left to suffer. I think it's worth considering that the film's focus on politics serves as a parody on the way media works around global crises. Headlines are typically focused on government decisions or on the disaster in terms of quantifiable measurements like casualties or economic repercussions. But not much is shown at a ground level at the many families and citizens who have lost their entire livelihoods. And even if you don't agree with that reading, I wouldn't go so far as to call Godzilla an icon for fascist dictatorship. In the film, it was only when they removed the top officials from the picture that the new team could step up and delegate tasks effectively. I think Shin Godzilla perfectly demonstrates the strength of people when they're willing to band together and solve a common goal. The emergency workers who inject coagulant into Godzilla bear the brunt of the sacrifices, most of which we don't even see except as giant trucks. But it illustrates the point that people can come together to become something greater, to achieve something greater. In the final scenes, the team aren't able to completely kill off or destroy the monster for good. Godzilla is left frozen in the center of Tokyo and is acknowledged that one day Godzilla may indeed reawaken and once again wreak havoc on the city. No, that isn't a plug for a Shin Godzilla sequel. It demonstrates how Japan is always at risk of another disaster, and that it is up to the preparation of the people to prevent future accidents. It also serves as a reminder that the aftermath of these disasters remain long after the incident, and that the scars will take generations of sacrifices and continuous preparation to heal. Godzilla has always been a powerful icon for Japan for its allegories about the horrors of nuclear testing and the devastating impacts it can have on the people. While much of the kaiju narrative has been lost in Western cinemas with overly campy remakes or reboots, Hideaki Anno's Shin Godzilla reboot reminds audiences yet again of the more grounded philosophy behind Godzilla. It reminds people of the devastation Japan faces frequently, and how much of it has become bogged down by the dissemination of media and the convoluted bureaucracy of politics. In this current age, as we slowly crawl our way out of a global pandemic, Shin Godzilla demonstrates how a country wrapped in emergencies can either make or break, depending on the leadership of its government.